In this video, we're going to take a look at Noisemaker. Noisemaker is a tool within Zbrush that allows you to create procedural noise and different types of patterns on your mesh surface. We can apply them as procedural projections, or we can actually bake them into the mesh. So let's step down to our lowest subdivision level, and we'll go to the UV mapping menu and morph UV. Now you can see, because it's a default polysphere, this does have UVs on there. But Noisemaker doesn't require UVs, but it can project either 3D or it can project into actual UV space. So we'll step back up to our highest subdivision level and go to the surface menu. Now under the surface menu, you'll find a light box for noise presets. And these are actually really handy, and it's a nice way to learn Noisemaker is to see how these different shapes have been put together. If you just go and open it up and look at all the different changes that have been made to the base interface settings, you'll understand how things like the erosion pattern here or the bricks can be created using the procedural tools inside of Noisemaker. So I'm going to go to Noise, and here you see we've got this window that navigates just like the main Zbrush window. We see this in Adjust Poly Paint as well. Just use the same hotkeys that we use inside the document window. Just Alt, click, and drag, and etc., etc. Now, here we have noise scale. If I turn that up, it increases the scale of the noise. Turn it down, it decreases the noise scale. Now, currently it's a 3D projection, which means it's being projected from outside the model. If I turn on UV, it's projecting it into the UV coordinates. So if I turn the scale down, turn the strength up, you can see the effect that we get. Now, if we go to Noise Plug, this opens up another level within this tool. This is the Noisemaker menu that has all the different presets of different procedural items. So here we have, the basic noise is just sort of a Brownian noise. This gives us things like hex tiles or grids or erosion. So if we go to Grid and click OK, this is probably the easiest to see. Now, Noisemaker is mixing basic noise with the plugin noise. So we'll turn mix basic noise down to 0. So I can actually see just the Noisemaker plugin. Plugin scale, we'll scale that down, and that's adjusting that grid. Turn that down. Strength is set in the negative, so the grid's pushing in. So if we turn that in the opposite direction, the grid will push out. Let's adjust the scale again, and there we go. Now, if you want to adjust the X, Y, and Z offset and the X, Y, and Z angle or rotation or scale, you can do that here with these sliders. So let's go ahead now and click OK. And here you can see that that noise is now projected onto the mesh. Now, this is only 98,000 faces. This is not actually part of the model. This is just a procedural projection. Now, if I want to actually make this part of the model itself, I'll need to increase my subdivision levels. So I'm going to divide a couple more times. Let's get up to about 1.5 million faces and click Apply to Mesh. Now you can see that that bakes that noise down into the actual geometry. So this is actually in the sculpture. So if I click Mask by Noise, I can mask based on that noise pattern that I just created. Control click, and I can invert that. And let's go to the masking menu and turn off View Masks. So the mask is still there, but we're just seeing the object. Go back to Surface and click Edit. I can edit the surface that we've already laid out with Noisemaker. Next to Noisemaker, we click Edit, and now we can change our procedural noise. So we'll change from the grid to, let's put hex tiles on, and go ahead and click OK. Now we zoom in between those grid tiles, you see we have the hex tiles. So we'll scale it up, and let's adjust the strength so they're pushing in the opposite direction. So now we've got this interesting hex pattern that's happening underneath the grid pattern. And we can adjust the scale again, dial those down or up. Now you have to have the mesh divided quite high if you're going to make it very, very small and you want to bake it down into the mesh. So click OK. And there we can see is the procedural projection. Click Apply to Mesh, and that actually bakes it down into the geometry. So let's take a look at another thing that we can do with Noisemaker. I'm going to switch over to our alien character. So this is the alien bust that we created in our quick start video. Now, I actually use Noisemaker to create this very, very fine kind of skin texture all over the character. I find it useful just to sort of break up the specular component and just to get a little bit of noise on the surface before I go in and do more specific and targeted detailing. I'm going to mask out the forehead area here. Let's mask it up to about there. And I'm going to step down a couple subdivision levels, invert the mask, and then Control-click on the masked area to feather it. Let's get the eyebrows masked out as well, and then Control-click to feather. And we'll step back up to our highest level, and let's go back to Surface, Noise, Edit. Now, let's orient and zoom in so we can actually see this area that we're working with. And actually, I don't want to see the mask, so let's go to Masking and turn off View Mask. So there in the viewport, the mask is not showing. We're still going to see it in the UI here, but we won't be seeing it in the interface. So what I want to do is I want to add a new noise plug to this unmasked area. So I'm going to select Erosion. Erosion selected, I'm going to turn down Mix Basic Noise and I'm going to turn the strength up, and plug-in scale will turn to about there. Now we're able to manipulate the color values as well. If you see there's color blend. So if I just color blend to this side, it's going to change the color on the raised portions. I'm going to go ahead and just bring this over to kind of a green. Get something kind of close to the base color of the character himself. So it's almost like there's strips of skin or some kind of raised keloiding or something there on this area, and then having that RGB element added in automatically is very, very handy. And that's the effect that we get. Now remember, we have a mask, so let's go to our masking, View Mask. We have a mask, so this color shift is not going to affect anything but the unmasked area on the forehead. So I'll go to Surface and I'll click Apply to Mesh. Now you'll see when we clear the mask, it has only been added to that unmasked forehead area. It's a very interesting eroded skin pattern there with a color selection that's quite similar to our base tone. Again, we can go to Mask by Noise, and that will reapply a mask now based on the noise. And I can invert that mask, and we're going to go ahead and do some more painting on top of these bits. If I want to add more variation like we have in the skin here, maybe some speckles of blue, I'll do that by going to the standard brush, spray stroke, dot alpha, and for my color I'll just click and drag and then sample color selection directly from my poly paint. There's that little bit of blue, turn on RGB and turn the RGB intensity down, and we'll go back to masking and hide the mask so we see our painting more clearly. So the mask is still there, it's just not visible in the workspace. So now as we spray through there, we start to get some of that bluish tint to match the rest of the poly paint. Clear the mask, and there we go. So Noisemaker is really nice for doing all sorts of things when it comes to skin, mechanical details, environments. It's also great for costumes. Here I have a shirt, and this is polygrouped, so the sleeves and the torso are separate. And also if we go to UV map, you can see that there's UV coordinates applied to this as well. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to add some hex tiles to the sleeves. So it's sort of like kind of a tactical armor or bodysuit. Something kind of you see a lot in like sort of mech and space suits. You see a lot of hex tiles in these designs. So let's divide up to 3 million polygons, turn off frame mode, and let's isolate the sleeves. Just Control-Shift-Click and then mask the body. Now we'll zoom in here and go to Surface, Noise, press the frame button here so we can frame the entire mesh, and we'll zoom into the arm. Now I don't want any basic noise. I just want to go to the noise plugin and select hex tiles. Click OK. Turn the scale down. Turn the strength up. And mix basic noise down. Now I'm going to change to UV. So now you can see the distortion has been corrected, but we will still have a seam along the UV seam. I'm going to adjust the plugin scale. Turn that down. And let's change the strength so those hex tiles are raised and the gutters between them are actually recessed. So we get this nice tileable hex pattern on both sleeves. So if I'm happy with that, I click OK and then click Apply to Mesh. And that will now bake that down into the actual geometry. So let's add a weave texture onto the portion of the garment here that we have masked at this moment. So we'll invert the mask, edit our noise. I'm going to turn off noise plugin here, and I'm going to turn my noise scale down, turn my strength down. Now here I've got an alpha on off. If I click that, I can browse to a JPEG or PSD. I'm going to select this tileable cloth texture. Now you see it's loaded into that swatch, and now I can adjust my alpha scale. So I'll turn the strength up so we can see it. Zoom in. If I adjust my alpha scale, I can change the relative size of that tileable fabric texture. Make sure it's going into UV coordinates and not 3D projecting, so that gives you a nice clean seam along the UV seam rather than stretching it. When I'm happy with that, I might scale it up a little bit. A little trick that I use when I'm texturing fabric and doing costumes for digital doubles, for example, often I will cheat the fabric weave up just a tiny bit in scale, because when it's actually one-to-one with the physical fabric, it can often appear quite noisy in the render. So cheating it up just a tiny little bit can actually very much improve the visible quality. So let's click OK, and now you see we've got our fabric weave. And if I go back to edit, we can of course do the color blend on this. So if I were to change this to red, bring our color blend up, bring it around maybe to purple. Switch our color blend down this way. We can have a different color. Let's put green down in the base. Let's do that. Click OK. And there we go. We zoom in. Now this is not yet applied to the mesh. Click Apply to Mesh, and that bakes down both the sculptural detail and the RGB. Clear the mask, and now we have a fabric texture with a bit of RGB color and our hex tile texture pattern running down the sleeves. And that is Noisemaker. If you have a Noisemaker preset that you like, something you want to keep, you can always save it. Save button is here. And you can always open a saved file with the open button. So hopefully you found this helpful. I think Noisemaker is one of the neater and more recent additions to Zbrush. It's a couple versions old, but it comes in really handy for all the reasons that I've just shown. There's so many things that you can accomplish with it. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.